Hi, this is Dee, and you're listening to my podcast, Let Me Clear My Throat. I have not done a podcast in probably about a little over a month. I've had a lot going on with the holidays and other stuff, but I also wanted to make sure that I did enough research and had my information together before I talked about or talked on today's subject, actually. This is probably going to be a big trigger, probably honestly upset some people, but also at the same time, it's information I feel like needs to be put out there and more attention needs to be brought aware to it. So that being said, I have a lot of information to talk through. This will probably be a long podcast. We do have a bad storm coming in where I'm at. I'm guessing from the hurricane. I'm in Indiana, but we always get the rain and stuff. So there might be some thunder boomers, and I don't know, maybe even a siren go off. But nonetheless, I'm going to sit here and do what I can do. And if I have to pause it, then I'll pause it, and we'll just go from there. So today we're going to talk about the military. And if you guys are familiar with me at all, you know how I feel about the military. And that in itself is a whole discussion with me. And I'm very passionate about our veterans, our military, our homeless veterans and military. And I feel like, and I don't mean any disrespect to the women population, because I will say that I am a victim of this as well as a female, but I'm not trying to put any dimness on the female going through this type of tragedy, but I feel like what doesn't get talked about enough is the male. And I think we need to really bring some attention to it. And I think that it also, hopefully, if you are listening and this touches you in a way, let me rephrase that. That doesn't, I'm so sorry. If this affects you, and I'm going to and I'm not laughing at, it's not funny. I'm just, anyway, moving on. If for some way this affects you as a male, first and foremost, my heart goes out to you. Secondly, there are resources, there is help, as much as that is worth. Because I know sometimes no amount of help and no amount of resources can actually take away all of what you have endured. And hopefully in some way, though, it can help you to realize that you are not alone. Even if you feel very alone, there's no reason to be ashamed. There is nothing that needs to make you any less of a man, or feeling inadequate, or whatever the emotions you're going through. I'm not even going to begin to say I know what any of you are feeling or going through, what you've dealt with, because I have had my own tragedies, and I'm not going to even begin to compare them, because every situation is different, every person is different. But at the same time, too, when you are a male, I like to say, as a female, this is my opinion, and males are looked at differently when it comes to masculine things. And I say that in respect, because our subject today is about military and male rape. There are plenty, unfortunately, plenty of cases in there in the population of the military, past, present, and unfortunately, I'm going to say future as well, because I mean, unless something is noticeably taken action and done with it, is going to continue to happen. And but as a male, especially And maybe I'm just going in a million directions right now, and I apologize, because I'm really trying to figure out how to put this in a respectful and appropriate way without sounding any different. And I just hope that whoever is listening to this takes it as just that. I am trying to do this in a respectful way. I by no means am I downplaying anything or trying to say anything other than trying to help and bring attention to this. And I apologize for any triggers that anybody endures during this. Honestly, if you are a victim, like I said, my heart goes out to you. So I'm going to read some paperwork that I have printed out. I've read over some of it. I've skimmed some of it. I do have some stories that I want to read. And also, too, I have some resources and also information on statute of limitations on even filing for criminal charges, and resources on that if that is something that you considered or need to know, or just informative stuff. So we'll just go along as we go and hopefully be able to touch up some bases. So in the first beginning of it, as the rain pours outside, in the beginning of it, I'm going to read some stories about some different cases of some military personnel that have been victims of sexual assault in the military. And this first article I got is from nytimes.com. It was an article that I came across. It was by Dave Phillips on 9/10 of 2019 and produced by Adriana Ramick and Beth Flynn. Again, that's on NewYorkTimes.com. If you want to go over this story or whatever, it is on this website. Sorry, it is really pouring outside. So we're going to read this together. Or I'm going to read it. And anyway, more than 100,000 men have been sexually assaulted in the military in recent decades. Now, this is where I go with this. I can read statistics. One is too many. However, statistics are only as good as the information collected. And I'm going to speculate with great assumption that there are several more cases out there that have never been reported or have never been included on a statistical ballot. So that being said, we're just going to say one is too many. It says, shame and stigma kept the vast majority from coming forward to report the attacks. 6 men are speaking out to break the silence. I have 6 stories here of different men in the military and their stories. Sexual assault in the military is a problem widely recognized but poorly understood. Elected officials at Pentagon leaders have tended to focus on the thousands of women who have been preyed upon while in uniform. But over the years, more of the victims have been men. On average, about 10,000 men are sexually assaulted in the American military each year. Again, I would say those statistics are not adequate because I'm sure there are several that are not reported. According to Pentagon statistics, overwhelmingly the victims are young and low-ranking. Many struggle afterwards, are kicked out of the military, and have trouble finding their footage in civilian life. For decades, the fallout from the vast majority of male sexual assaults in uniform was silence. Silence of victims, too, humiliated to report the crime. Silence of authorities, unequipped to pursue it. Silence of commands that believed no problem existed, and silence of families too ashamed to protest. And I'm going to say silence in those that have been victims based on the fact of not only their sexuality, but also, too, the fact that these are supposed, and I'm not belittling you, please don't misunderstand, this is just me saying, just go with me on this, please. This is supposedly men that are supposed to be males. They're supposed to be strong. They're supposed to be in shape. They're supposed to be level-headed. They're supposed to have their shit together. They're supposed to be on the mark. They're in the military. They're supposed to be, a tin hut, whatever. And they're supposed to be people that defend our country. They're supposed to be people that are providers of family. So how in the world could these males be raped? How in the world can they be victim? Well, society, this is why I'm doing my podcast. Because the ignorance of society thinking that they can't. That going on, we're going to read more. As soon as I find my place. When women face a much higher rate of sexual assault in the military, about 7 times of that men. But there are so many more men than women in the ranks that the total numbers of male and female victims in recent years have been roughly similar. According to the Pentagon statistics, about 10,000 a year. And before women were fully integrated into the armed services, the bulk of the victims were men. Because if you remember, back in the day, women weren't in the military. Gays in the military was prohibited. People's sexual preferences were a no-no. And now we've got women in the military. We've got people that have a variety of sexual preferences, whatever direction they may be. But it all still comes down to one thing. They're human beings. Each individual one is a human being. But you know what else they all have in common? They defend the country that you sit in, if you're in the United States, but also, too, they have other militaries in other places. So, that being said, let me retract that statement. They are the same men and women, whatever your criteria is where you're from, that protect you. So while they're out protecting you, who's protecting them? Government officials? The same government authority that is violating them, that is taking away innocence that they have left, and their dignity, their future, their plans, their hopes, their goals, their life. Their life. And some of these stories that I have here, I'm not even going to say it breaks my heart, because that's just not even a strong enough emotion, honestly. We are an ignorant and disgusting group of society if we think that men are any less than just a human being that serves just as much of being a victim in this world as a female. And if anybody thinks otherwise, maybe you need to just listen up, and you come to your own conclusion at the end of this, because these are real life stories, and these are only ones that have been put on the internet. And I am sure there are some out there that, unfortunately, some victims are not even alive to listen to this podcast. For generations, the military wasn't looking for male sexual assault victims, so it failed to see them. According to Nathan W. Galbraith, Deputy Director of the Defense Department's Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, only in 2006, after the office began surveying service members, he said, "Did the military learn that at least as many men as women have been assaulted?" That was surprising to senior leadership, Mr. Galbraith said. Everyone was so sure the problem was a woman's issue. A report published in May indicates that while the share of male victims who come forward has been rising recently, an estimated 4 out of 5 still do not report the attack. For tens of thousands of veterans who were assaulted in the past, the progress made in recent years offers little comfort. The damage has already been done. Many have seen their lives buckle under by the weight of the loathing and bitterness, and have seen decades pass before what happened to them was acknowledged by anyone, even including themselves. Here are the stories of 6 of those men. 6 of the men that have reported their stories. The Department of Veterans Affairs has reviewed each man's case and formally recognized him as a victim of service-connected sexual assault. The military branches in which each man served were asked to comment for this article. Several of them. But they declined to discuss specific cases. Now this first one, now mind you, when I took these, they actually have pictures of these gentlemen on there. And if you go to this website and follow along with me as we read or whatever, they do have pictures of these victims. And this one here, and I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to say none of them, that this one is any more important than the rest of them. Let me rephrase that. But this one really took my heart, because this man is 71 years old today. Well, when this was published. And I could not even imagine this gentleman's name is Jack Williams. He's 71 at the time of this printing. Enlisted in the Air Force. He was in the Air Force. Assaulted in 1966. It starts out, "If you report this, no one will believe you." An Air Force drill sergeant told Jack in boot camp. It was 2 a.m. in the sergeant's office. Mr. Williams recalled. The sergeant had just choked Mr. Williams, who at the time was 18, until he passed out. He said, and then he had been raped over a desk while dozens of other recruits slept in the next room. It was 1966. The military had no response and no prevention program, as it does today. And there were no protections for troops who reported assaults. Homosexuality was not just forbidden in the ranks, it was seen as a national security threat. If you came forward and said you were raped, people would have thought that you were queer or a child molester. You were treated like it was your fault, said Williams, who now lives in Washington. After the attack, Mr. Williams said he did all that he felt he could. He took a shower and went back to bed. The sergeant raped him twice more during basic training. Each time Mr. Williams stayed quiet, determined to make it through boot camp. But as soon as Mr. Williams graduated, he reported what had happened to Air Force authorities, expecting them to jail his attacker and start an investigation. The anger still trembles in his voice decades later when he describes the Air Force's response. No investigator ever called me, he said. Nothing was ever done. Instead, his chain of command began to complain about his performance. He said because of the rapes had left him with damaged kidneys and had torn his rectum, and because he was missing too much training in order to get treatment, he was soon forced out of the Air Force for being medically unfit. His service record shows. Today, veterans like Mr. Williams are coming forward in growing numbers to demand that the Department of Veterans Affairs provide treatment and compensation for the harm done to them. Some 61,000 veterans, including Mr. Williams, are now formally recognized by the department as having been sexually traumatized during their service, and the number of claims filed each year has surged by 70% since 2010. A monthly check is poor compensation, though for decades spent in limbo. I can't believe I just said that. I'm so sorry. Not libido. Limbo. Which is where my mind seems to be. I had a future. I wanted to serve my country. And I was good at what I did, Mr. Williams said. That was all taken away from me. Next story. 30-year-old Paul Lloyd, Army National Guard, assaulted in 2007. Paul Lloyd was pushing a cart through the supermarket near his home in Salt Lake City, looking for light bulbs, when he stopped to sniff a variety of scented candles on a nearby shelf. Suddenly his hands were over his face and he sank to the floor sobbing. One candle smelled just like the shampoo he had been using in the shower at Army Basic Training in 2007, when he was beaten and raped by another recruit. Some little thing can happen, and you're back in that little 3x3 square shower, he said later. It's hell, and there's no escape from it. Mr. Lloyd joined the Army National Guard at 17, when he was assaulted in the shower one night after everyone else had gone to bed. He said he told no one. Even when he ended up in the hospital the next day from internal bleeding and a torn rectum, and doctors asked him what had happened, Mr. Lloyd said he was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and said simply just shrugged. I feel like I couldn't say anything, he said. I would look like a total failure to my family, to my platoon, to myself. During the years when Mr. Lloyd was in the Army, only 3% of male victims reported sexual assaults, according to the Defense Department estimates. The percentage has increased nearly sixfold since then, but the vast majority of men who are sexually assaulted still never report it. Mr. Lloyd earned top scores in marksmanship and physical fitness and wanted a career in the military, but said a sense of betrayal and disgust at being raped started to gnaw at him. When he was given leave for Christmas, he decided not to return. He hid out at his sister's house for a month before the National Guard found him. He was taken back to boot camp and eventually discharged for misconduct. He was later able to upgrade to discharge to honorable. At home, he told no one about the attack. He stopped going to church, fell into drinking, and alleged a struggle to hold a job. He questioned his own sexuality. His family wondered why he couldn't keep his act together. It took 5 years for him to decide to tell them what had happened. They saw me as broken for a long time, he said. When I told them I'd been raped, they said, finally, it all makes sense. Next story. 64-year-old Bill Minix, Air Force, assaulted in 1973. Bill Minix was too ashamed to tell his family why he was kicked out of the Air Force in 1973, and they were too ashamed to ask. I'm going to pause right there for a second. I'm going to say, this generation needs to understand, with due respect, things are so different today. Things were not looked at the same as they are today, or accepted the same as they are today. Things were more all due respect, structured. Supposed to have been. Families were families. Husbands and wives. They didn't, divorce was pretty much a no-no. You didn't have kids out of wedlock. It was a no-no. And you didn't take care of other people's kids, for the most part. At least that's where I have been exposed to in my life, of stories I have been told. Males were the role models. Males were the providers. Women were at home, as they say, barefoot and pregnant. That's why a lot of the generations have 10, 11 babies. But today's time is a lot different. So for these people to say what they're saying about their families being ashamed of them, that has a lot to do with misunderstanding and acceptance, if you will, on the males being portrayed of anything less as what I had said earlier. And being in the military should, in some people's eyes, reinforce that strength in a male. And that is the way, in my opinion, a lot of people have viewed it in the past. And with that, I'm going to continue on. What would people at church say? What would the neighbors think? He didn't speak a word to anyone about having been raped, he said. Not for the next 40 years. He enlisted at 17 and was a few weeks into radar technician school when a group of older enlisted men and officers took some new recruits to an off-base resort. In a private bungalow, after a round of drinking, Mr. Meenick said the older men told the recruits it was time for their initiation. At first there was laughing and nervous joking, and then there was silence. Mr. Meenick said, I was scared to death, and we got forced into sex acts none of us wanted. He said the teenagers were made to perform oral sex and were sodomized. What an awful thing. When you go back to the base the next day and you're facing these very same people, he said. Mr. Meenick struggled to make sense of what had happened in the bungalow. Real men don't get raped, he told himself. They fight back. He found he was unable to concentrate on his work and started to do poorly in radar school. He was desperate to get out of the Air Force. I couldn't stand being there, said Mr. Meenick, who lives in Oregon. I didn't feel I could report it to anyone. Actually, I don't know if this is Oregon, because Oregon I thought was O-R, but this says O-R-E. So, Bend, O-R-E, it's Bend, comma, O-R-E. Goodness. I didn't feel like I could report it to anyone. The best thing to do was run. He signed and added, I've essentially been running for most of my life since then. Mr. Meenick's Mr. Meenick's deserted, was caught a week later, and then deserted again. The Air Force put him in jail and threatened to prosecute him if he didn't agree to leave the service voluntarily with less than honorable discharge. He took the discharge. And I'm going to stop right there for a minute. Some people don't know, when you go what they call AWOL and you desert the military, that is a very big crime. And back in the day, I was born in 1973. So prior to that, my assumption, including my grandfather, was drafted. And he was in the Army. He is on my biological dad's side. My mom's dad was in the Navy. And I have Army in my family. I have Marines in my family. I have the Navy in my family. And I have several other friends that are in different places. But one thing I was always taught, and learned was that you deserted. It was a bad thing, and it was consequences of being jailed and other things. He took the discharge. Once he was out, he spent most of his adult life in what he calls a black box. Shut off from the world by anger and shame, he burned through jobs and 2 marriages, drinking to numb his own loathing. His parents never spoke to him again, and they died not knowing the truth of what happened to him. In recent years, through counseling provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs, Mr. Meanix has been able to come to terms with what happened. He was remarried and has joined a local veteran group called the Oregon Band of Brothers. It was Oregon. He drove his Jeep in the local Veterans Day Parade in 2018. That filled a big void for me, he said. I had military service taken away from me. For years, when I heard the anthem or saw the parades, I would cry. I can feel like a veteran now. And again, when back in the day, if your family felt like you shamed their or tainted their name or your heritage or whatever that may be, you were shunned. Basically, you were disowned. A lot of, depending on the family, but unfortunately, his parents never spoke to him again. And when the truth finally came out, they had already passed away, and never knew what happened to him. So not only was he raped as a man, but that same tragedy took away his life with his parents. Next story. This doesn't have an age on it. It doesn't matter, really. Army, Billy Joe Capshaw, assaulted in 1980. The few years Billy Joe Capshaw spent in the Army were the worst years of his life. He said, but to this day, he wears an Army veteran baseball cap. He said it deflects unwanted questions from strangers about the marks on his face. It explains the scars, he said. They don't ask. In 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested and confessed to raping and killing 17 young men and boys, some of whom he then dismembered and ate. The news media soon learned that Mr. Capshaw had been Mr. Dahmer's roommate in the Army and descended on Hot Springs, Arkansas, where Mr. Capshaw lives. At a news conference before a bank of reporters, Mr. Capshaw described the heavy metal posters Mr. Dahmer decorated their room with, and with W.C. Fields' jokes Mr. Dahmer liked to tell. But he did not mention the vials of lorazepam, or I don't know, and ketamine, I'm guessing, ketamine, that he said Mr. Dahmer often used to sedate him. Or the metal bar he said Mr. Dahmer used to beat him. Or the motor pull rope to tie him down, or the scars still visible on Mr. Capshaw's cheeks after nearly 40 years from Mr. Dahmer trying to muffle his screams with a clenched hand. I couldn't, Mr. Capshaw recalled, shaking his head in an interview this spring. You say you've been raped by another man. People blame you. They shame you. They just don't know how something like this can happen. Mr. Capshaw joined the Army at 17. and was stationed at Baumholder Army Garrison in Germany in 1980, when he was assigned to share a room with Mr. Dahmer, who was then an Army medic. Within days, he said, Mr. Dahmer was beating him, drugging him, and keeping him locked in the room. At one point, Mr. Capshaw jumped from the second-story window to escape and ended up in the hospital with a cracked pelvis. But he never said a word about what was going on, even to the doctor who examined him. It developed into Stockholm Syndrome type situation. Mr. Capshaw said he totally controlled me. He didn't let me leave the room. He would beat me and rape me. But we would also play chess. He would buy me books and suture up my wounds. I don't know how to explain it. Mr. Dahmer was discharged from the military in 1981 from alcohol abuse. Mr. Capshaw was discharged a few months later, with his military records show. For 5 years after his discharge, Mr. Capshaw said he didn't leave his mother's house. He stayed awake for days at a time, trying to stave off nightmares, so tense that he could barely swallow solid food. He didn't tell his family what had happened. In a small town, he worried he'd never be able to get out from under the whisperings if word got out. For a long time, the only person I ever told was my best friend. And his response was, I'll never tell anybody. Mr. Capshaw said he didn't remember neither. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me back up. Mr. Capshaw said he didn't either. That's a pretty good friend. He knew it would hurt me. It would be if it got around. Sorry. For a long time... Oh, I already read that paragraph. I'm sorry. After years of therapy, Mr. Capshaw decided in 2010 that hiding what happened would not help him. With the assistance of his psychiatrist, he created a website to tell his story of what he has gone through and how he had begun to heal. Next story. 29-year-old Ethan Hansen, Marines, assaulted in 2014. Ethan Hansen has avoided taking showers since he left the Marine Corps in 2014. Instead, he runs 1.5 inches of warm water in a bathtub, then rinses quickly with a plastic cup, with each splash evoking a painful moan. When I do come into contact with steam, hot water, or anything that makes my skin slippery, he says, as he looked around the bathroom in his house, honestly, it makes me want to vomit. Mr. Hansen was one of a group of Marine recruits who were sexually assaulted in the showers during boot camp at Camp Pendleton, California. Like many of the sexually assaults on servicemen, it was a hazing exercise meant to humiliate and intimidate young troops. According to Rand Corporation's study, 1 in 3 men who are sexually assaulted in the military describe the offense as hazing and bullying, twice the rate reported by women who are sexually assaulted. It happened to Mr. Hansen after an exhausting morning running the obstacle course. The platoon was showering when a drill instructor marched into the steamy room. He was angry at what he had heard talking. He ordered the 60 naked recruits to pack themselves into a tight line against the wall, genitals pressed up against backsides. After holding them in that position for several minutes, he ordered them to run to the other side of the room and line up again, then back to the first side. It was back and forth for more than an hour, Mr. Hansen said. In the following days, several of the recruits reported the episode to their chain of command, and the drill instructor was prosecuted. Mr. Hansen has a copy of the Marine Corps investigative report confirming that the episode took place. Mr. Hansen graduated from basic training and tried to move on, but soon afterwards he saw a Marine dressed like a drill instructor, and he had a panic attack. He told his superiors that he was suicidal and was sent to a Navy hospital. Now I'm going to pause here for a minute. He was in the Marines, but I have some friends that I know that were in the Navy. They were Navy. One was a Navy medic. He has several. He was has a Purple Heart, and he saved a lot of people. And he was in the military, he was in the Navy, but he was transferred into the Marines. He was in the Navy, but the Marines didn't have medic, from my understanding. They didn't have doctors and medics. So the Navy actually overlapped into the Marines to provide them medical care, from my understanding. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but this is from what I understand. Let's see. Sorry, I lost my place. But when his mental health did not improve after 4 weeks, the Marine Corps forced him out of service, noting on his discharge paper that it was for failure to adapt to military life. It's their way of saying it's my fault, not theirs, he had said after the discharge. If I was injured in training, they would have to treat me and compensate me, but they said that this was pre-existing conditions. The Department of Veterans Affairs had since formally recognized his case as one of the service-connected sexual traumas. I'm sorry, these are just heartbreaking. Next story. 48-year-old Heath Phillips, Navy, assaulted in 1988. Heath Phillips stepped in front of a crowd of hundreds of soldiers at Fort Hood in Central Texas. He took a breath and then shared a secret that had gnawed at him for 25 years. My name is Heath Phillips, he said, and I was sexually assaulted when I was in the United States Navy. In 1988, when Mr. Phillips was 17, he arrived at his first ship, and a group of sailors offered to take him out for a night on the town. They traveled to Manhattan, he said, and he woke up on the floor in a hotel room to see one of the men ejaculating on his face, while others were trying to pull his pants off. Mr. Phillips writhed out of their grip and locked himself in a bathroom. He reported the attack to the ship's master at arms the next day. He said, but the master at arms just looked at him skeptically. Were you drinking? Mr. Phillips recalls him saying, Do you know that you can get trouble for underage drinking? Mr. Phillips said he was sent back to his bunk in the bowels of the ship, where he slept just a few feet away from the attackers. For months, he said, they beat and raped him repeatedly. Mr. Phillips said he went to the master at arms again and again, often with black eyes and split lips, to complain about the abuse. He always accused me of lying. He would say I had no proof. I think he just didn't want to deal with it. Mr. Phillips deserted and was arrested and sent back to the ship, and he deserted again and again. Eventually, he was forced out of the Navy with an other than honorable discharge for running away so many times. For decades, he said, no one else... let me back up. For decades, he said, he told no one else what had happened to him. But in 2009, he received counseling at a veterans hospital and came to realize that silence might only allow assaults in the military to go on unchecked. He became a vocal member of advocacy groups and met with lawmakers. A congressional investigation supported his account, and he started telling his story at military bases, something that petrified him at first, but he now sees it as a vital part of healing. I got my military career cut short, and that's not right, he said, after addressing the soldiers at Fort Hood. But I still love the military. By speaking out, I am serving in a different way. Now that is 6. This is horrible. My heart goes out to you guys. And this is not even enough. And again, if anybody has fallen victim to anything like this, I pray for you. And I hope that somewhere that you can get to the point that you feel adequate again. I have a few other ones here that I pulled up. They're not stories. Some of them are, but this one here, I'm just going to summarize these. No, I'm going to read this one. There was some in here I read that they were using broomsticks and stuff to rape some of these men. And whatever they could get a hold of, actually. And this is an article by Nathaniel Penn, September 2nd, 2014. The original story appeared in September 2014 in an issue called Son, Men Don't Get Raped. And it originally appeared in this article. And there are several examples and stories here, and I'm not going to read them all because I have other information that is just as important that I want to read. This one here, says sexual assault is alarmingly common in the U.S. military, and more than half of the victims are men. According to the Pentagon, 38 military men are sexually assaulted every day. Every day. And again, that's only those that report it. But also, too, I'm going to take it a step further. Those that report it and somebody actually does something about it or acknowledges it. That's the difference. Because you got your statistics. You got people that come forward. And these passive stories are prime examples. These gentlemen tried to reach out for help. And what good did it do them? All it did was make them feel more like a worthless piece of shit. And question everything about themselves even more. It took more than just their dignity and their manhood away. Stripped them, literally, of their soul. And every bit of life that they had in them, that they were trying to muster up to get help. Shame on our military for that. And I am very big in the military, And and I know every case is different. And there are a lot of good things about our military. I always say, I'm a proud American, not because of our government, but because of our men and women in the military. So when I say shame on our military, that does not mean the men and the women of it that have fallen victim to our government. When I say shame on our military, I'm talking about our government. Our government that likes to play military. Because our men and the women are the ones that represent it. They're the ones that bring it forward. They're the ones that carry it. They are the ones that are on the front line. Or our government officials are doing whatever they do. But more needs to be done. And no, I don't have the answers to it. Because unfortunately, this doesn't just happen in the military. Men are not just victims in the military to rape. They are victims to rape in prisons. They are victims to rapes in nursing homes. They are victims to rapes when they are handicapped. They are victims to rape in their families. In society. And in all due respect, women even rape men. And that might make some people giggle. Right, what's a 6 foot, dude, muscular, working out, bench, whatever, big military, and not even have to be a military dude. It could just be somebody that's not a military, just a regular civilian. And hell, he could be married to this woman and be married to her, I don't know, this type of thing, like say 26 years, 22 years. A long relationship. And just because they've been married in that long relationship and say they have kids together and this, that, and the other, don't think that man still cannot be a victim to rape. Because he can. And it's not a matter of overpowering the male. Because you can have this very well-to-do, male or whatever, and he's real strong, and maybe he can, kick some other dude's ass real good. Don't take no crap off nobody. Then who is going to believe that he's a victim of rape, right? It ain't a matter what you believe. It's a matter what happened to that gentleman. It don't matter what you think. It matters how he feels. It's a matter what he believes. It matters what he is traumatized by, what he is triggered with, what he has endured, his flashbacks, his nightmares. It's about him. It's not about you. And that's where we mess up. That is where we need to get... That's just where we are just... There's this... We just got so much stuff backwards in this world. It's just not even funny anymore. And honestly, it hasn't been funny for a long time. It's actually very shameful on this end as a part of society in this world and part as a human being on this planet. I am ashamed of how things are handled and not handled. Because our morals maybe that's too big of a word for some people to know the definition of. And in today's society, maybe we need to Google it. But I assure you, Google probably doesn't even understand if Google is ran by the government. Because they are our leaders. They are our examples. They are those that are supposed to set boundaries, but also, too, They are supposed to be the ones that have our backs. They are the ones that are supposed to have the military. They are the ones that are supposed to have our first responders. And all of those in this world that walk this planet, I don't care where you live. You got some kind of structure above your head that dictates where you live and what you do. Freedom is not free. There's no such thing as freedom. And I say that with all due respect to all our veterans and military. Because if we were free, we wouldn't still feel the way we do about our government. They take away our rights. They take away our heritage. They take away our resources. They take away our dignity. They take away our hope for a positive and respectful upbringing future of ourselves and our children. We have so many kids out there and generations out there that are not even qualified for our military from today's time. They're not even qualified. And I assure, in no disrespect to our generation today, I'm not trying to sound mean. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm stating facts on what I believe. I like to be what I call a classic. I am 51 and a half years old. I am not a child. I have been through a lot in my life. I've seen a lot. I've endured a lot. I've overcome a lot. But I assure you, I have not even begun to even put my toe in the water, so to speak, in comparison of what the generation that all of us below that generation forgets to respect. Our heritage. You cannot have your future if you don't respect your past. Our generation above us, above me, I like to call vintage. Because vintage is the new antique. Just saying, in my opinion. Our older generation, with all due respect to them, are something that our younger generation, and even my generation, can continue to learn from. It's not a matter of so much seeing a veteran walk by, or a military person walk by, or a first responder walk by, or nurses and doctors or teachers that are of our vintage generation. But there are also other human beings in this world that are just as vintage as the next. You've got homeless people living on this road, and I know I'm getting off subject, but I'm not. Because it's my podcast, I can talk what I want to. Because this is fact to me. We have homeless out there of older generations, military people, personnel, older generations, human beings. I don't even need to put a freaking label on it. A human being. Self-medicating, trying to find a place to lay down, trying to figure out where their next meal is, trying to keep warm out of the weather, trying to survive their life, lost everything, maybe only have the clothes on their back, if they even have any clothes on their back, and they might not even have any shoes and socks. They might be just in their underwear, if they even have underwear, because some homeless people don't even wear underwear because they just don't. And by the way, most women, if you ever decide to make care packages and stuff for the homeless, because I'm going to get on this subject too, they don't like pads. They prefer tampons. So if you ever want to help a homeless woman or anything in that nature, that's the scoop on that. Because most of them probably don't have underwear on, but it's also easier for them to maintain, if you will. And I know this because I've helped a lot of homeless people out, and I did make care packages up and hand out hygiene items and stuff. And I tried to give a whole bunch to these ladies, and she's like, "I can't wear those. I don't wear underwear. I don't have any." And even though I was homeless for 2.5 years, I had a hysterectomy before that, so I didn't have that problem. But my point of that is, where's our government? Where's our government? Why are these people on the street? Why are these people living in cardboard boxes? Why are people living at freaking bus terminals? I have people laying on the concrete ground with nothing. Nothing. Trying to sleep. And you know what I did? Walked over to them and asked them if they wanted some frozen prepared meals. Because I had a whole bunch of them. And they were more than eager to accept. And, you know, our men and women of our military, they have put their lives on the line. So each individual person, human being in this world, has what they call freedom. But yet gets arrested when the same government maintains this world, and these people don't have a home to even come home to. And they were living on the streets if they're lucky. Lost everything they've got. Maybe even their medals, their dignity, respect. And I'm going to take it back to the military end because it gets it gets me riled up more than just civilian homeless people. And I'm very passionate about that too. Please don't mistake me. But how dare we? How dare we? And I'm not trying to belittle that and compare it to these stories that I have read. But yet it is kind of in the same category, if you will. It's like a branch over into... No. I'm sorry, I'm counting right now so I can calm myself down. And I think I just skipped some numbers. I'm going to finish reading some of these stories because I know we're already an hour into this, and quite frankly, we're an hour into it. But like I said, this is going to be a long podcast, and some things need to be changed. And I'm going to put it very bluntly, if I haven't already done so. Those in this generation, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Those in our classic and vintage generations, if you will, that may be in higher commands of wherever that may be, and I'm going to put it back into the military. Think of it this way. You want to ignore a story, or you want to ignore somebody's cry for help, or you want to not do something about it or take it seriously, I want you to look at your children. I want you to look over at your young, innocent children. Because that might be your kid someday. Going to somebody for help. And you know what happens? Maybe they responded the same way you did. So don't look at it as you're not doing something for somebody else. Look at it as you have an opportunity to make a difference for a human being. Isn't that what you signed up for the military for? Who are you protecting? Your ego? Or the man you're not supposed to leave behind? Isn't that the way it is? Leave no man behind? You didn't leave him behind. You left him for dead. You didn't even bother to go check if he was even still breathing, so to speak. And if you know me, I'm big on metaphors and stuff. But quite frankly, if something doesn't change, it could be your kid. It could be your own flesh and blood, your little innocent kid over there. Maybe he's in kindergarten, maybe preschool, maybe they're in junior high, maybe high school. Just learning how to drive, just started dating. Maybe they're going to prom. I don't know. Maybe they're, maybe they're not even born yet. Maybe you're pregnant. Your wife's pregnant. I don't know. If something doesn't change, then who's going to change it? Next story. A warship is like a city. Sprawling, vital, crowded with powerful men and women. But on a warship, as in a city, there are people who will see you not as their friend or their neighbor, but rather their prey. After turning 25, Steve Stovey joined the Navy to see the world. His first year and a half as a signalman on the USS Gary was the greatest time of his life, he says. In late September 1999, Stovey was sailing to Hawaii, where he joined by his father on a Tiger cruise, a beloved Navy tradition to which family members accompany sailors on the final leg of a deployment. Parents and kids get to see how sailors live and work. They watch the crew test air and sea weapons. The Disney Channel even made a movie about a Tiger cruise with Bill Pullman and Hayden, I know I say her name wrong, Panettiere? Panettiere. I believe she was the same girl that was in one of the Bringing It On episodes as one of the cheerleaders. Yes, I think that's who it is. But anyway. The West Coast itinerary is usually Pearl Harbor to San Diego. On the morning of September 20th, 2 weeks before the warship was due to port, 3 men ambushed Stovey in a remote storage area of the ship, where he had been sent to get supplies. They threw a black hood over his head, strangled and sodomized him, then left him for dead on a stack of boxes. He told no one. He was certain that his attackers, whose faces he had glimpsed, would kill him if he did. He hid in a bathroom until he could contain his panic and tolerate the pain. Then he quietly returned to his post. Stovey says he might have killed himself were it not for his father's arrival. The timing of the visit was almost a miracle, he says. When I saw him, it was in the most safe feeling. I never felt more whole in my life. Father and son spent the next 5 days on board ship, almost certainly being watched by these 3 attackers. I just kept it inside, he said in a low voice. I couldn't tell him. And there are several pages to this, and if you go to hold on, I got the website here. I know I do. It's called Men Don't Get Raped. You Google it, and there are several pages and pages of just a glimpse of stories. Here's the one on the broomstick. Well, one of them on a broomstick anyway. Case of Matthew Owen, Army, 1976 to 1980. I was from the Midwest, and they said they hated the Yankees. At night, they'd pull the covers over me and beat me with a bar of soap and a sock. They would push me out of the bunk onto the floor. They would mess up my locker during inspection. One night I was getting ready to go into my room in the barracks when a blanket was put over my head. I heard 5 different male voices, which I recognized, because I had heard these voices when they harassed me every day. They beat me down onto the floor and forced my legs open. Then they took the end of a broomstick and forced it into me again and again. Each time it felt like my insides were coming out. The blood was a blessing because it seemed to lubricate the broomstick. In order to heal, I'm supposed to forgive. I've been told that many times. But how do you forgive somebody that's done that to you? You tell me that, could you? I know the identity of the ringleader, and 2 of the others come back to me a year ago. I searched online, and there was no trace. There's millions of people that have had there are millions of people that have those last names. My thought of what I could do to them is I would first tie them down to a table. Then I would take a blowtorch. I would slowly roast them from their toes to the top of their effing heads. You know how long that's been on my mind. And that's all the stories I'm going to read. I think that's more than plenty. I shouldn't even have to read stories to make it enough. And again, my heart goes out to anybody that is being triggered by any of this. And if you have done this to somebody, and let's just say hypothetically you've never gotten caught, or nothing has been done to you, that's between you and God. Now, according to Miltary.com, Patricia Kime on September 10, 2020, had posted this article, and it is on military rape cases and the statute of limitations. So if you have not done anything, or have not gotten anywhere, I should say, on feeling like you have got any less than a positive response from somebody to help you, there are places out there that can help you and resources. But if you have not done any formal prosecution, know that there are no statute of limitations. The Supreme Court overruled any other things that were enforced before, and I'm just going to sum this page up. Basically, it says military rape cases have no statute of limitations. And so I'm just going to leave this big long page to that. So there are obviously places that can help you, and there are cases that people have been prosecuted. And in one part of this paper, it says, in the new opinion, the justice said the Uniform Code of Military Justice favored the government's interpretation that military rape cases are punishable by death, and therefore carry no statute of limitations regardless of when the crime occurred. So, if that helps anybody that needs to know that part of, because I know some things have statute of limitations, and just know that this does not. There are plenty of resources. I say this in respect. There could be resources out there a dime a dozen, and I do have several pages of resources on here. However, I'm going to say this before I read some of them. Your resource sources are only as good as the people that run them. Your resources are only as good as the result of the help, if that makes sense. You can have resources out there, but if they are if they are abused, if they are misleading, if they are not if they are not what they are supposed to be, and they don't go above and beyond the expectations of their resource, then I would probably move on to the next resource, because we can have resources and they can just be as worthless as anything. I mean, again, we'll go back to the homeless. We have plenty of resources, don't we? But what results do we have? And I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges, but it is a thing. And there needs to be a huge change. And that's just the bottom line. And I don't have to say that, but yet I do. Because it seems to be a broken record. And for some people who don't know what records are, maybe that's what our problem is. And I don't mean disrespect on this generation, and I'm sorry if it comes across that way. But again, I'll take it back to the day when a man's word was sealed by a handshake and his word. Nowadays, your signature is not even your signature, because for one, you're not taught another language, a second language. A second language, by the way, is also cursive. Cursive writing is a second language. And our government and our school systems have taken that out of our children's lives, where I live, and has taken that second language away. So now when our children get older, and they're going to find all these documents and all this important information and all these other things that lead up to their livelihood and their futures, they're not even going to be able to understand it. It might as well just be written in some, second language. And if nobody is there to teach them this second language, I don't even think Google's going to understand what to do. So how are they going to translate? But nowadays, our signature is not our signature. And you can just hit select on a document sign, and the computer signs it for you. And then you just choose what font you want. National Sexual Violence Resource Center is nsvrc.org. N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, V as in Victor, R as in Richard, C as in cat.org. Article by Susan Sullivan on July 21st, 2020. There's a military sexual trauma resources list on this site. This is exactly what this page is all about. If you get a chance to, please go to this site. Get resources out there. Research the resources. But also, too, if you are in need of resources, please go to this site and see if there is some way of some kind of resource that can help how you need them to help you. Because they can offer something, but if it's not something you need, then it's just a resource in the air. Because it's like going to a food pantry. You could be starving. And yes, I know people say if you're starving, you'll eat anything. All due respect, this is true. However, you don't know if they got allergies. You don't know what they can eat and what they can't eat. I'm allergic to egg whites. I eat some of them. I do. But I'm allergic to egg whites, as an example. Some people are allergic to dairy. Some people are allergic to certain dyes in their food. Some people are allergic to certain types of sugars. glucose, was it lactose, is it maltose, sucrose? Did I already say a lot? That's the type of sugar. Those are sugars, if I remember correctly from medical school. Could be wrong. It's been a while. But people are lactate intolerant. People are allergic to certain types of dye and additives and so-called preservatives that our government puts in our things. Because, all due respect, heaven help us if we have healthy food grown out of our own gardens, or butcher our own animals, or, whatever, like they did in the day when, I don't know, food was really food. Meat and potatoes on the table. And it was actually meat. It wasn't something that you could throw a frisbee at somebody and black their eye. But, if you go to a food pantry, and, I just dropped my light. Hold on a minute, please. I'm going to pause this. Hold on. Okay. Sorry about that. Not that you would know, because it didn't pause at your end, but it did mine. And it's probably a good thing I did pause it, because, anyway. I'm not for sure if I broke the light, but, oh well. Okay, moving on. Focus. As I was saying about the food pantries, if you have somebody that goes into a food pantry, and they go in to get food and say that all the food that you have available and resources is not, they are not able to eat it because, let's hypothetically say they're allergic. So they have the resource to get the food, but yet they can't eat the food because it could kill them, or they could have a bad reaction to it, or whatever the case may be. So they have a resource, but they can't, it's not a resource that they are able to get the quality care out of that they need, if I'm explaining it right. So you can have all the resources available. It's like I used to tell the people I'd go and take hygiene bags to, and clothes and different types of blankets and shoes and stuff. We had a shoe drive and different things that we would take them, and food. We'd have set up a dinner or whatever. And I told them, I said, tell me what you need, because I could have all the resources. I could bring clothes and blankets and pillows and whatnot. And if you don't need that, then it's not going to do you any good. And if you have something you need, then tell me what that is, and then I can help you with that resource. And some of them lived on the river, and they're like, bug spray. Bug spray is a big thing. Batteries, or stuff like that. And most time it was bug spray. And you would never, you would think of it, but you wouldn't think of it. You would think of it as you sitting out there at the lake fishing or something. But imagine out there, trying to live and survive, and you're trying to find your next meal. But instead, the mosquitoes and stuff like that have found you. And instead of finding a meal, you become a meal. So, that being said, I pray that there are some resources out there that do fit, where you feel comfortable with them, and where you are able to get some type of, like I said, what you need. I don't even know the right word for it, but on this website, there was a tragic death, a private first class, Vanessa, I'm probably going to butcher her last name, Gillian, Guillen, with a little squiggly thing above the E. Now, obviously, this is a female, but so what? She's a human being. The sexuality of the person being raped should not even be a factor of identification, because they could just say a human being was raped, and that should be more than enough. But during this, there was a sexual assault and harassment on the ranks in the military on this woman. And they have listed some resources. Sorry, I'm just kind of skimming this as I'm reading. I guess that's kind of rude. I'm not trying to be rude. General information on sexual violence in the military. One resource is the Department of Defense Annual Report on Sexual Assault in the Military. It has a full list of reports from the DOD Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. Hold on a minute. Sorry. There is sexual violence in the military for sexual assaults advocates. The guide provides advocates working in community-based sexual assault programs with an understanding of sexual violence in the military. It includes resources for advocates who, through relationships and collaborations with the military, can offer support in responding to the needs of survivors and preventing sexual violence. Understand special norms within the military that contribute to sexual violence, medical and prosecution procedures, and explore prevention programs and models throughout the branches of the military. Now, if I'm reading this correctly, these are some resources of not only for the victims, but also people that want to get involved to help victims. And for me to, I guess I should have went through this and highlighted some of them more so. So it might actually be a little bit of both as I read through here, because I'm skimming as I'm reading. So if I pause, it's because I'm reading. Let's see. Military sexual trauma from the VA. Website explains how to access services the VA provides to veterans who have experienced military sexual trauma. You're not alone in recovery from military sexual trauma. From the VA, this brochure explains common reactions to military sexual trauma and resources for victims. Let's see. It looks like the VA has a lot of resources that can help you. Safe help room sessions for military men from DOD Safe Helpline. This tool from Safe Helpline, listed above, is an online community of sexual assault survivors in the military that meets to support each other in taking the next steps after a sexual assault. The Sunday sessions are for male victims and provide a safe and confidential platform for men to share and talk with other survivors. Now, I'm not sure exactly if this is the same across the board at other places. So obviously my resources that I have taken off the internet might be different from what's accessible in your area. So basically what I typed in, if I remember correctly, is resources for men raped in the military, or I believe something of that nature. I just basically just kind of bluntly typed it in. The number 1, and then the word in, and then the number 6. So it says 1 in 6. While not specific to military sexual abuse, this organization helps male victims of sexual assault find healing. 1 in 6 offers free and anonymous weekly chat-based support groups facilitated by a counselor. So this particular group helps any male that has suffered sexual assault abuse. And like, again, it's the number 1, the word in, I as in ice cream, N as in Nancy, and the number 6. 1 in 6. Protect Our Offenders. Protect Our Defenders. This is a national organization dedicated to ending the epidemic of sexual assault in the military. They offer free legal and other assistance for military sexual assault survivors, including active duty service members, veterans, and civilians. It's called Protect Our Defenders. There is one for women. It's called SWAN, Service Women's Action Network. S as in Sam, W as in wow, I guess. A as in Apple, N as in Nancy. William. I'm sorry. S as in Sam, W as in William, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy. I couldn't think of a W. SWAN is a member-driven network for women who have served or currently serving in the military. They are dedicated to supporting, connecting, and advocating for the individual and collective needs of service women, past, present, and the future. There is a podcast called the Blue Grit Podcast. G as in George, R as in Richard, I as in Ivan, and T as in Tom. The Blue Grit is a podcast from members of the Air Force that features conversations with current and former military leaders, mental health experts, elite athletes, veterans, and other individuals who have overcome significant adversity. The podcast aims to increase awareness of psychological health and assist in the destigmatizing mental illness, normalize airmen's own struggles, and internalize messages of hope and recovery. And that is called the Blue Grit Podcast. There is also Silent Voices, hosted by veteran and MST survivor Rachel Smith. Silent Voices is dedicated to unearthing hidden stories and shedding light on the pain, resilience, and strength of military sexual trauma survivors. They have a documentary called The Invisible War. In 2012, investigative documentary about the epidemic of sexual assault of soldiers within the U.S. military. Survivors share accounts of being demoted, punished, discharged, following the reports of sexual violence. So this is a documentary that was done, and survivors basically are sharing their stories in this documentary. There are military programs. SAPR or SHARP, SHARP. If you're in the military, hopefully you're familiar with these. In the sense of having, and I say familiar with them, and what I mean by that is not having to learn them because it was a need to know. You needed to know because you needed to know, because you were a victim. I say that I hope you're aware of these because resources should be made known to you up front, I believe. Just like they have HR meetings and stuff on conducting sexual harassment cases in workplaces and whatnot. They should give this information out to you. So, anyway, United States DoD Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office. The Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, which is SAPRO. S as in Sam, A as in Adam, P as in Paul, R as in Richard, O as in Oscar, is responsible for oversight of the Department's sexual assault policy. SAPRO works hand-in-hand with the services and civilian community to develop and implement prevention and response programs. Now, these are all, they have these categorized by branches of the military. And from my understanding and reading this, they all have this program. The Army has the SHARP program. the U.S. Army Sexual Harassment, Assault Response and Prevention Program. The Marines has the SAPR program, which is the United States Marine Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. The Navy has the SAPR program, which is the Navy Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. The National Guard has the SAPR program, which is the National Guard Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. The Air Force has the SAPR program, which is the Air Force Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. And the Coast Guard has the SAPR program, which is the Coast Guard Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program. And I will say this, in my opinion, when people talk about military, they forget about the Coast Guard. I feel like. There are several branches. You have the reserves. You have branches that are not talked about. Well, they always say, I've been in places that you'll never know, done things you'll never know, or, in all due respect, I don't remember how that exactly goes. And you know what? I'm sorry that, I wish my apologies and my sincere condolences was enough to ease the demons and pain that you carry. But with that being said, I pray even more that this podcast, along with other things and references, open up the door to getting this out there more. So that way, that can be at least a toe in the water, if you will, of trying to get some kind of healing and closure for you. Because resources are resources. And I will say, and I don't want to sound conceited anyway, and some people that know me will probably laugh and say, yes, indeed. I was given a voice. I was given what some call the gift of gab. I am a talker. I am a social bug. I don't care for society much, but I am a social person. I love people. I just don't like people. I get social anxiety, let me put it that way. But I like to believe in most cases I am good with my words. I do know how to put my words into play, if you will. Most times, sometimes I do get tongue-tied. Sometimes I do. Some people might not believe me. I do get lost for words. But I have been through a lot of trauma in my life. And with that respect, I started this podcast. It has been a very big tool for me in helping me to heal and overcome some of the things in my life that I have endured that unfortunately I need to try to heal and find closure on, but at the same time I need to work through. Because people tell me sometimes you need to get over it. You need to push it back, or, you need to just move on. No, that's been my mistake. Majority of my life, I have done just that. I am taking control of my mental liability. I am taking control of my life in my head, in my heart, in my mind, which is my head, but not always the same thing. And I understand that. So that's where I go with my mind. But my soul, as a human being, as a woman, as a mother, as a child, as a human being. And my podcast has been very therapeutic for me. I have not done a podcast, like I said before, in a little over a month. I've had a lot going on. I am a self-harm survivor, but during this time off, I didn't fall backwards, but with all due respect to myself, I sat down. And I just had to remind myself to get back up. And I don't need to elaborate on that to anybody, with all due respect, because I know what I mean. And that's the whole beauty of where I'm at in my podcast. I love helping people. I have spent my life holding everybody up, holding on to trying to help everybody, being all that I can for everybody else. And I forgot me. And it almost cost me, literally, my life. And if I can just make a difference for one person, if even just myself, then I have accomplished my goal. Because each time I turn this microphone on, I might have a paper in front of me. I might have a plan. I might have an idea of what I'm going to talk about or where I'm going to go. But you know what? Majority of the time, I really don't know how it's going to go. Because sometimes I've typed out paper and I've set it aside and free mic'd it many times. And I just wing it. And that's been one of my sayings. I just wing life one flap at a time. Step over my own shadow. Take a leap of faith and build my wings on the way down. But I have to remind myself who manufactures those wings. And just pray it's not the government. But honestly, I know it's not. Because those aren't the wings that I'm even going for. Those aren't the wings I need. And those are not the wings that have caught me. Or saved my life. It are people that I don't know, people I may never meet, people that I have met and I have no clue that I've met them or have passed in their life somehow. People that I have met that have no idea how much they have saved my life. And there are people that have saved my life and don't know what to do with theirs. And then some. But I will tell you this. It matters. You know why it matters? Because all those reasons of why I'm sitting here today, all those reasons that you hear me in your ear right now, all those reasons that you might be drying your eyes or feeling sometimes the pain that I candidly share with people that I don't even know who hears me. All I see are squiggly marks on my screen. And that's the way I want it for now. Why? Because it's my podcast and don't need to know. Because I don't need to sugarcoat or feel like I need to walk on eggshells or tap dance about who I think is or is not listening to me, because I have the freedom to say what I want on my podcast. And I'm going to take that freedom to do the best I can to make a difference. Even if it's just for myself in the moment. But I pray wholeheartedly that you're right there with me. And if you have been affected by somebody or something, and you are living in ways that your demons are stronger than you, please do the best you can to reach out and get help. And yes, that is easier said than done. And for those that judge people and saying, you should ask for help. I told you if you needed me to let me know. You know what? Sit your butt down. Because obviously you have not endured that level. And just pray wholeheartedly for your blessing and being grateful that you are not ever succumb to that level of that emotion. But also, too, how dare you think that it is that simple? So if you have nothing positive to bring to the table in this world, this global planet that we rotate on, or whatever you want to believe, if you don't know your place at the table, then just sit down and be quiet and learn, listen, and respect, because your morals are not going to heal that person that needs help, and your judgment, your negative opinion, if you will, weighs heavy on somebody who is crying silently for help. Because not all screams echo in the dark. Only in the head, in the mind. And they don't always make it out alive. So unless you can be empathetic, please don't make it worse. Because when somebody's clinging on to their moment, their breath, basically, and they don't even realize it, don't judge that person. You might just be the very one that helps them find their oxygen again and be able to want to try to take their next breath. Don't suffocate it. Don't take that last glimpse of hope away from them. And if you don't know what to do, then find out together. It takes one person in one moment. Period. And if you are able to reach out to somebody, I'm a big advocate on getting help with that. And I walk that talk. I am in counseling. I got 4 appointments actually this month. 988 is the suicide prevention helpline. If you're in another country or something, don't have that. Not really for sure on what that is in your area. And I always say you want to try to figure out a game plan prior to the moment that you can't I have found with me that I need to have a game plan prior to if I ever get into one of those moments again. I have different coping techniques that I have utilized. I've got backup plans to my techniques because sometimes, depending on the situation and the frame of mind, they are not always compatible with that moment. I do say my ABCs in my head. I say them to where I can actually get to the point where I can say them smoothly. And at the end of the alphabet, and won't you say them with me, I take a deep breath and I start again. And when I can actually go through it at least one time without hesitation or tears or whatever, then I say it one more time. And I have been known also too, when it has been so overwhelming, that I will say it out loud and also do it in sign language at the same time. And it has helped me. But I also have had to do other techniques as well, because there have been a couple incidences where it did not. And I literally physically had to remove myself and go outside. Phoning a friend does not always help, because as soon as you get on that phone and they say, "How are you doing?" "Fine." You dry your eyes and you go on, because you don't want to dump it on that person. So no, it's not always easy to call somebody when you need help. 988 Suicide Prevention Helpline. Please also note other resources and coping mechanisms and stuff. I know I dog Google a lot, but Google does have some valuable resources as well. And as I always say, one thing in your life that is priceless is your time. You cannot get it back, and it is very valuable. And if you have taken your time out to dedicate it to me and listening to me in your ear tonight, and also my other podcasts, I think this is my 40th podcast. I also have a YouTube channel, which I'm going to post this on YouTube as well, because I do Podbean and YouTube. If you're taking your time out to listen to me, there is not enough gratitude to express how valuable and heartwarming that is to me. And I thank you with all of my heart for giving that time to me. And on that, I am going to close out. We are at almost 2 hours. Please feel free to check out my other podcast, and I will do my best not to wait another month, because I do have a lot of other ideals that I want to throw out here, and hopefully in the near future we'll be doing video, and also having video podcasts and some guest speakers as well. And I know I've been talking about that for a while, but I am adamantly trying to get that into the works. There's just some things going on that have kind of stalled that goal. So that being said, I'm going to close out now, and I hope everybody has a safe and blessed night. Thank you and good night.